It's been revealed that in a Vicar of Dibley Christmas episode, Dawn French's Reverend Geraldine, making a very welcome return to our screens, have missed her, will take the knee and then deliver a sermon expressing solidarity with the movement, with Black Lives Matter. Now, this news has, as you would expect, split opinion online and generally, and many people are confused as to why this BBC One comedy show has chosen to make such an overt and very contemporary political statement. I mean, as somebody wrote in one of the papers this morning, you wouldn't have expected to see Eric and Ern raise a fist in support of the Black Panthers, you know? So is this a step too far into the political spectrum, or what some people might describe as wokery? The editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill, thinks people are actually getting sick of being lectured to in places where they've actually gone to enjoy themselves and forget about the real world for a bit, like a soccer game or indeed a sitcom. Does this actually make you angry, Brendan?
I'm perplexed more than anything else. I think you're absolutely right. People can't go anywhere now without being beaten over the head with a Black Lives Matter message. Now, I've never met a single person in my life who doesn't agree that Black Lives matter and that they matter as much as any other life. But Black Lives Matter, the movement, is something very different. It's an ideological movement with some eccentric viewpoints which many people disagree with. And I think people don't want to switch on Britain's Got Talent or the Vicar of Dibley or go to a football game and be bombarded with political messaging on behalf of this organisation. They're sick and tired of it, I feel.
Why do you think, we'll come back to the whole question of whether these are suitable arenas for making political statements, or some people would say social statements. But why do you think that so many people don't seem able to make the differential between the Marxist element, and it's a very powerful element, of Black Lives Matter, and, as you say, the wholly positive and more than acceptable message that Black lives do indeed matter, and we have to stamp out racism wherever we see it. We all agree on that. But why do you think that so many people are almost blind to the fact that this particular movement, this political movement, is a quasi-Marxist movement, actually believes in defunding the police, which of course is extremely ironic when they make their protest marches. They expect the police to come and protect them, and yet they want the police defunded.
Well, that's the great mystery, why more people can't see this problem. And, Black Lives Matter, the organisation, has some views that people disagree with. It's anti-police, it's anti-family, it's anti-Western, essentially. It thinks Western history is one long litany of, one crime after another. It subscribes to the ideology of critical race theory, which essentially says all white people are racist and all black people are victims. Now, most normal people don't subscribe to these views. They would be quite hostile to these views. I think the real problem is that the kind of ideology pushed by Black Lives Matter and its numerous supporters in the establishment actually runs counter to the kind of anti-racism that people like me were brought up on. We were brought up to believe in the Martin Luther King view, which is that you should try your utmost to forget about race, judge people by their character, not their colour. And now what we have, we're moving into a world that is increasingly obsessed with race, obsessed with identity, and encourages us all the time to view people as representatives of their racial group. Now, to my mind, that's a regressive idea that runs counter to the positive ideas that people like me were brought up on. That's why I'm hostile to Black Lives Matter, because I actually think it undermines genuine anti-racism.
Now, what about soccer games? Because obviously racism is a real issue in the world of football, and there are Herculean efforts being made to, and I quote, kick it out. I personally would see, setting aside the whole connection with Marxism that the BLM has, I personally think that that's much more of a suitable arena for footballers, of all ethnic backgrounds, to be able to link arms and bend knees and send out a message that they are anti-racist, setting aside the Marxist thing. What do you think about that? Do you think that's different from say, the Vicar of Dibley?
Well, I think fans are feeling slightly exhausted with this now, because my concern is that it's gone on for so long. I mean, this has been taking place at football now for months on end. Every football game, even before lockdown ended and people could actually go back to football matches. Even before that, when we were watching football on TV, there was the taking the knee, anti-racist messages were being flashed up on the TV screens. And I think the reason people started to bristle at all of that is not because they disagree, not because they are racist, but because they felt like they were being preached to. They felt like they were being spoken down to. You know, you idiots with your pint in the pub watching the football, you're probably racist and we're going to help to re-educate you. So people found it quite paternalistic, I think. And what was interesting is that the Millwall QPR game this week, the players didn't take the knee, but they did stand behind an anti-racist banner, and the fans cheered them in that case, because fans are, for the most part, anti-racist. What they have an issue with is the Black Lives Matter movement and the way in which Black Lives Matter seems to have hijacked football and other areas of public life.
That's an interesting comment. So what you're saying is that the Millwall fans who booed on the first occasion because of the direct connection with Black Lives Matter cheered on the second occasion because although it was still an explicit anti-racist message, as you say, with linked arms and an anti-racist banner, they were trying to show that was what they supported, and what they didn't support was the Black Lives Matter movement, which bending of the knee many people directly associate it with.
That's right. And, you know, you're right to say that there is an issue of racism in football. I mean, there was a terrible issue of racism in football in the 70s and 80s in particular. Thankfully, that's fizzled out. For the most part, there are still problems that need to be resolved. But, you know, football is one of the great success stories, I think, in terms of having a more racially fair society. 30% of professional players are black. They're worshipped by children. They're cheered on by fans from all backgrounds. Football is rowdy and rude, and the chants are offensive and all those kinds of things. But it's also a place where people from all kinds of backgrounds get together and cheer to the rafters for black players, white players, all sorts of players. For people now for the woke elites essentially to come into that sphere and say, listen, you have to subscribe to critical race theory. You have to think about racial issues all the time. I think that's a backward step, because football was moving into a zone of being a post-racial sport, and I think it's now been infected with a new form of racial thinking.
I've seen a couple of messages here that are saying that as far as the Vicar of Dibley is concerned, isn't the show simply reflecting the times that we live in, and this is the return of the Vicar of Dibley, so, you know, it is contemporary, it is in the current day, and it's just reflecting our times. And I suppose I should add one thing. I mean, we haven't seen this sketch, we haven't seen this bending of the knee by the Vicar. It could be, actually, although the intent behind it is that which we infer, it could actually be quite funny. It might be part of a comedic routine that actually somehow laces humour into a political message. If it does make you smile, would you feel a little bit less hostile towards it?
Oh, definitely, because I think the only way you can judge comedy is whether you find it funny or not. Yeah. And I don't like the way in which sometimes comedians are told that they're not PC enough or they're too PC. You know, the question is, are they funny? Do they make you laugh? So if the Vicar of Dibley makes us laugh, thumbs up for that. But from what I've heard so far, it does sound like, this is the thing that worries me, it sounds like the BBC is going to issue a sermon to the public. This is what you should be thinking, this is what you should be doing. And I'm worried that Black Lives Matter has become a kind of secular religion. You know, we all have to literally bow down to it. We have to take the knee to it. We have to subscribe to all of its points of view, even if we don't like them. And if you don't, Dominic Raab discovered this when he said he would never take the knee. If you don't do those things, you're in trouble. You risk being cast out. You risk being demonized. So I don't like the extraordinary culture of conformism around Black Lives Matter. And I hope the BBC is not going to force this down our throats, but instead does something a bit funny with it.
I do think that's an interesting analogy with organised religion, and those who can quite reasonably differ on points of detail in that religion are often accused of heresy, aren't they, and are sort of cast into outer darkness. Very interesting point. That's editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Thank you for your time, Brendan.